Welcome back, everybody, to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. It is Business Monday. It's actually clearing up outside. I think Saul Kaplan brought a little sunshine from the Business Innovation Factory. Let's talk about the height of innovation, the cutting edge, where the world's going, the future of business in America. Sears, Roebuck and Company is not off to a good start this week, declaring bankruptcy this morning and filing papers overnight in federal court. It's somewhat unimaginable. I mean, we've seen it coming for a couple years, but before that, you know, the retailer, you know, we all grew up with the Sears catalog, and it was the innovator, right? It was Amazon before Amazon. What happened here?
Well, I mean, first of all, we did see it coming. I mean, this has been, the bankruptcy is coming for a while. The private equity guys who owned it before, you know, monetized everything they could, to prop up results. I don't think there's anything left on the decks for anybody to come in and claim. But you're absolutely right. Sears, they pioneered retail, right? They were the retailer. They created enormous value by getting access to goods, you know, to people all throughout the country, not just in the big cities, but as people were moving west in this country. They were the innovator. I mean, it's not unlike Sam Slater coming here to Rhode Island and setting up his mill, right? You know, when you're the innovator, right, the biggest challenge you have is how do you disrupt yourself? How do you continue to innovate instead of getting stuck in the model that made you great in the first place? Because the more focused you are on what brought you to the dance, the more likely you are to be disrupted by somebody else. Now, in Sears' case, it took a long time for this to happen. It's affected every retailer on the planet. You know, we can talk about Nordstrom here at Providence Place Mall, but Sears was the poster child of the innovation in retail for so long. We all remember it. You know, some of us are even old enough to remember the catalog.
Yeah, when the catalog came, it was a big deal, right?
Yeah.
You know, I didn't realize, because was when it, for decades, it set fashion in America.
Oh my goodness, absolutely.
You know, I just knew it from being a kid in the toy section, but it set American fashion. What was on the, what was in the men's and women's sections in apparel decided what people wanted to aspire to look like,
this
as
was
much
cultural.
as Vogue magazine.
This is part of the fabric of America. This was our culture.
You could buy a house, you could buy a car.
That's right. Families sat around with that catalog and circled, you know, what they wanted, what they hoped for. You know,
it was the internet before the internet.
It was.
Yeah.
No, it absolutely was.
So if you control all that, right, and you've got this 100 million, I don't know what the distribution was, 60, 100 million catalogs to every household, how do you lose it? How do you miss?
Well, you lose it because you don't create the conditions to try more stuff, to try something different. Everybody sees innovation through the lens of the way it works today.
Right.
This is Sears, this is what a store does, this is how we measure the performance of every store, of performance in the region, how stuff moves through the shelves. Like, all the performance metrics are tied to the way the existing model works, and that's true. That was true in retail, and that's true at Sears. And so everybody wants to innovate, but only if it helps run the business better today. Nobody wants to innovate to say, maybe there's an entire different way to solve the customer's problem, right? They had all their capital tied up in bricks and mortar. The real estate was some of the most valuable
absolutely.
In the corporation, much more than the ongoing enterprise was for a very long time. So the short version of this story is the innovator's job is never done. No matter how good you are, no matter how strong you are, you better be thinking about what's next, including what's next that could disrupt the way it works today, and you have to get ready for that. Easier to say, you know, than it is to do, but now we live in this world where there are disruptors everywhere waiting to take out existing business models, and so you better be doing R&D for new business models. Everyone talks about R&D for new products, new services. Let's take technology and help us run our business better today, run our hospital better, run our school better. But what if that same technology could completely change the end user, the customer experience? And a different model, might be the way to help that customer, and yet we don't touch it because it's not what we do.
So let me ask you a question. About, I'm going to say 15 years ago, a well-known brand hit rock bottom. I think it was on the verge of bankruptcy. It had to go to its direct competitor for a cash infusion. And now it's the first trillion-dollar value company, right? Apple literally was at death's door and had to go to Microsoft to get a cash infusion to keep alive. It was only 15 years ago. It's now the first trillion-dollar company in the world. Is Sears dead, gone, buried, or can something like that? Because what Sears does have, whether the brand is a dead brand or not a dead brand, it's a known brand. There's not too many Americans that don't know what Sears is, and a lot of people have some fond recognition of it. It's Craftsman Tools, or what was it, Kenmore Appliances.
Socket wrenches, we all had those.
Absolutely.
Still do have them.
And you got them for Father's Day, or you gave them for Father's Day, or whatever it was. But it had some unique attributes to it. Is it dead, gone, buried, or can it be rejuvenated?
Well, I'm sure that
You've consulted for a lot of companies. Who's the deadest? You don't have to name them. Who's the deadest, and who's come back to life?
Well, the assets always find their way to whatever the use is if they're priced right.
Right.
So the vultures come in.
Yes, right.
They want to get at the assets. I think Sears and Kmart, also owns Kmart. I think it's way too late for them. The time that you need to reinvent yourself is before I used to use the analogy, before the plane is nose diving into the Kmart parking lot.
So they are now Anderson Little-esque, right?
So I don't think you're going to save it. That doesn't mean that there aren't assets there that aren't going to find their way to reuse, in the marketplace, configured in a different way. But I think this is too far gone. Now, Apple, on the other hand, pretty interesting story, right? Steve Jobs, he was amazing at reinvention. He was beautiful at saying, okay, today we sell our computers through retailers like Sears, right? CompUSA, that's where we used to go to get the
And their big market was schools. Remember that? That was the John Scully play.
But
schools.
But what Steve Jobs did is he said, you focus on today's business model, and keep it going, right? I'm going to come over here with another team, and we're going to explore a different way to do this. And so he disrupted Apple and himself over and over and over again, which is what the art of innovation is about. The ability to do two things simultaneously. Keep strengthening the way it works today while exploring and testing entire new ways to delight customers. And when that new way to delight customers looks like it's scalable,
right,
then you start scaling it, and figuring out how to harvest the core.
Right.
But most leaders are all in on the core and protecting and trying to get regulations passed to try to lean against or slow down the inevitable disruption. I just think we live in a time now where this happens faster and faster. And so unless you're exploring entire new business models while you're still driving, the existing one, you're going to fail. And they didn't teach us how to do this in business school. Most of these CEOs only know how to strengthen today's business model, and incrementally improve it. They do not know how to create an entire new business model like an Uber, or an Airbnb, or what Amazon is doing and running away with it, in the retail sector.
So no Apple recovery for Sears. You're crossing that off the list.
It's hard to see.
While you were away on vacation, we were working hard last Monday morning at 6:30 in the morning. Jeff Grabowski tweets out his deal, and Deepwater Wind is acquired by a Danish company. I believe it was $510 million. and it was U.S. dollars. There was some reports from Jeff and some text back and forth that it might have been in cod, originally negotiated in cod fish. But $510 million. Here's a Rhode Island startup. It's about a 10-year overnight success. Jumped through 1 million hurdles to become the first offshore wind project in America. What does it say about innovation in Rhode Island? And what are the lessons for the rest of us unworthy entrepreneurs that we should take away from what Deepwater's been able to do?
Well, first of all, congratulations to Deepwater, my friend Jeff. You know, it's personal for me. It goes way back. He was working in the governor's office.
Right.
You know, I was running economic development, and the governor was very high on wind energy, and we all got excited about this vision of why can't Rhode Island be the first place in the country to have offshore wind,
right?
And we put in place the mechanisms, right, to go select early partners that Deepwater ultimately won,
right?
We put in place as a state, very, very innovative, the conditions to accelerate the regulatory process.
And by the way, this was no slam dunk. That company,
goodness.
Deepwater, was dead 4, 5, 6 times. We launched in 2010. They were a few years old then. I think we, raised real questions early on as to whether or not A, this company was serious, B, whether or not it could hit all the regulatory. And the only marker against it was the Cape Wind project off Cape Cod, which hit every obstacle and every opposition, and Ted Kennedy and other powerful interests who put up every roadblock possible and ultimately sunk hundreds of millions of dollars
that's
investment.
What happens. That's the normal response to every innovation.
Right.
And resiliency and the ability to answer these questions and to work through these processes is what defines the winners. Right. And so literally they put together, the state, Rhode Island, put together a regulatory framework to zone, if you will, right, the offshore area. Right? Well, we know what it's like on land, where everything to the square foot is zoned for a particular use, right? And we debate it. But there was none of that out in the water, right? In state waters or federal waters. And in advance of this, this would not have been possible if the state didn't do its part to create those conditions, including the regulatory environment. And so they were persistent. They got access to the capital necessary for that phase of development. They put up the prototype of what that model looks like off of Block Island, so you could actually see it. It was real. It wasn't just a business plan or a report, and it worked. They connected it, to the mainland. They had an agreement, to be able to purchase the power, the output of this, and so congratulations to Deepwater Wind. Now here's what's happened, right? The folks in Northern Europe, right, the Scandinavian countries,
want to be.
They were way ahead of us,
right?
They have the conditions, the incredible wind off the coast there. They were early in offshore wind and built huge enterprises there. And North America and the American coast was late to the game. So don't you know, they've been watching very closely. And if you're Jeff and the team at Deepwater, you're watching their interest, right? Because
Absolutely.
the amount of capital it's going to take to do this next wave of development, is enormous. Right, so good for them. I don't know all the details. I read Jeff's going to stay on as CEO. I don't know how long that is and who they're sending over from Northern Europe here. But I hope Rhode Island, keeps a seat at the table. Continues to enjoy some employment, out of this, because as they scale, there's going to be opportunities for jobs, and these are good jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. There's engineering jobs. There's manufacturing jobs. There's logistic jobs. These are big projects, very complex.
And the lead time to do this, not just for Jeff and the team, for the state. I look at this now, and remember,
it's a decade.
But I remember sitting in the rooms, right, trying to make sure that the process was there, to
Thank
be able
God
to
you
move
didn't
this
screw it
idea.
up. I mean, not only did you,
despite us, they were successful.
Not only did you help it, you didn't screw it up, and that's half the battle, right? Let's see, some other news today that came out is that scooters are back in San Francisco. San Francisco had cracked the whip on the class of scooters that had popped up over the past year. 2 companies won agreements with the municipality. Bird scooters are not one of the scooters, 2 other scooter companies. Once there was a regulatory structure here in Providence, the Bird scooters were picked up overnight and have yet to be seen back here in the capital city. Now we do have new bikes. So new bikes seem a little bit better behaved, maybe not as innovation driven. What's the trade-off here? What's the lesson?
Well, I don't know.
Did government's regulatory hand crush the innovation of Bird Scooter here in Providence? And we went back to the known, everybody can borrow a bike.
Well, Bird scooters thought they were going to just kind of waltz in here with their scooters.
Well, they did waltz in.
Yeah, and I think they realized that they better have some existing relationships and better have some alignment and local support, if this thing is going to take hold. So Jump, this is the entity that is now owned by Uber, right? So there's lots of capital behind it, has come in here with relationships, and a business arrangement that I'm assuming is good for the city. And so they got support, unlike what the Bird scooters got. I think it's really interesting, and I do think it's innovative. It's a completely different business model. These bright red Jump scooters, you can't miss them. I mean, they're like commercials everywhere you go. Not to mention that they've sold commercials on the bike.
Sponsorships.
So someone's thought about all the different ways and different revenue streams, and different partnerships that come from this. And from a consumer standpoint, I think we'll see what happens when people are done experimenting with it. But right now, it seems like everywhere I go in the city, there are now Jump bicycles everywhere, and people riding them that I wouldn't have expected. Riding a bicycle around the city.
That's right. The demographic, when you look visually, at least, you can only, is very diverse. A young, old, blue collar, white collar, student, and
unlike those scooters, where I don't think Grandma was going to get on one of those scooters.
No, Grandma almost got run over a few times, but no, the Bird scooter had a young male demo. And the Jump bikes seem to have a much more diverse strategy.
We'll see where it goes. I mean, there'll be, excuse the pun, bumps in the road, for sure.
Especially in this city,
accidents.
There's potholes everywhere.
Of course. So we'll see. And again, it comes back to resiliency and staying power. It's nice that they have some capital, behind them. And I always like to see how Providence and how Rhode Island plays, given the scale. Again, this is not New York or Boston, right? So the economics at the scale that we operate on have to be favorable to all parties, right? And so I'm assuming they have a decent starting model, but it's probably not the model they'll end up with. Let's see how it evolves.
Let's talk Fane Tower for a second. We went up and saw one of Fane's towers in Toronto. And it was attractive, neat, upscale, and remarkably unremarkable in the city of Toronto, as there's about 500 towers of that size or larger.
So it wasn't an isolated tower. It joined other towers of that size?
Yeah, so actually at one point somebody built the first one, right?
Yeah, you think.
But it was 47 stories. It was the 4th tallest on that city block. 4th tallest on that city block. It's about roughly a little shorter in height, about the same number of stories as what's being proposed in Providence. Toronto, for a number of reasons, some of it environmental, is building up. Try and get more density, try and pack more people into the urban metro area. It's a city on fire. They're taking down 10-story buildings and replacing them with 50-story buildings. In the John Della Volpe poll, the numbers remain the same from June, upside down about 10 percentage points. Is this, it's so out of scale, or is it we're just so unwilling to try something new that we can't start with the first one.
Yeah. My first reaction.
Do disclose, you are an East Sider, which then clouds everything, right? If it's not made out of brick, you're opposed to
I
it.
resemble that.
Right. What's your office in?
Yeah.
What's the exterior material of your office
The
building?
old mill building?
Yeah. Is that brick?
Yeah.
And then your home?
Yeah.
Is that brick?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That is true. Okay. Now, having said that,
Unveil
now
the
that
bias.
you've discredited me before I get to answer the question, I think it's probably some parts of both of the things you say, but somebody does have to go first, and we have to be willing to allow a pioneer, to come in, even if it makes us a little uncomfortable, because we need more capital, we need big, bold ideas, and we need to start changing the psychology around here, where we have 8,000 ways to kill anything that's interesting,
That's right.
or different, or new. It's always hard for the first tower, right, to come in, right, because you can't find 3 or 4 other ones, there to compare it to, so somebody has to go first. So my first instinct is, we've kind of, we're trying to kill this thing before we even really, have a thorough civic conversation about it. Now, I know that there are people that have legitimate reasons for why that particular site, may or may not be the best site. So I don't want to go all in on it's just wrong to block it, right? And I do think a healthy conversation locally. What I look for is, are we having a real dialogue? Are our public leaders, right, open to a real dialogue, allow it to happen, not allowing us to get so polarized, like we see nationally, around some of these debates, right?
Most elected officials, most high-level elected officials, will barely utter a word about this project. Dominic Ruggiero, the Senate president, is probably the only one.
He came out.
He comes from union roots. He thinks it's good economic development.
Yep.
But just about everyone else, from the governor to the mayor of the capital city, has given sort of wishy-washy responses to the question.
Well, I mean, it's silly season, so everybody measures their words, and nobody wants to take untoward risk, heading into election, But I'm sorry, this is important. And you should have a point of view on this, and it should be clear. It should not be wishy-washy, and you should make your case, and we should have a public dialogue, so that the decision can be informed, and everybody can feel like that they were heard, in the conversation. But in the end, we've got to welcome folks with capital that see Providence and Rhode Island as a growth opportunity, and we have to be willing to allow them to invest here.
Isn't that one of the biggest risks of rejecting this project, is that it's gotten a fair amount of local press, it's gotten some regional press, is that Providence kind of, which took a long time to overcome, became a place known as, they don't want outside money, they don't like people from the outside, they don't want to mix anything up, and that it's very, very difficult to come into Rhode Island and build anything for political reasons, for business reasons, and that shouldn't be the only reason to allow it to happen. But there is a danger zone that if you reject, a $300 million project, that in most cities, according to Fain, it took him less than a year to get all his approvals. And his hearing in Toronto, and at the public hearing, there were 8 people. 5 of them were people for him, and 3 people were sort of neighborhood people who just came to hear about it. And no one voted no one spoke in opposition about the project.
Yeah, well, we do have a reputation for it being very difficult, to get large projects done here. Right. There's no question about that, and we need to fix that. Doesn't mean that we have to allow every project.
Absolutely.
It doesn't mean that there aren't good reasons for slowing down, and for saying no to a project. But let's have the conversation. Let's have a real conversation, and let's not just dismiss this stuff out of hand. And let's be self-aware enough to know that we have this reputation, and everyone in the country knows it. That's a serious investor or developer.
Right.
and they do the math before they decide whether they're going to come here or not.
Right.
You know, so we should be much more transparent about that this is our history and this is what we're trying to do about it, and then go through the process. And okay, you make a tactical decision on each individual development, but it does seem like a lot of this stuff is dead before we ever have the first conversation.
I do love some of the people who may not be exactly real estate or development experts saying this project is not economically viable. Like, you know, my job as a procurer of a antique store allows me to know the insights of the financial viability of the residential and
economic viability is a relative term.
That's right.
It's like
as we were
said
talking
with
about Sears, yeah.
Every asset has a use. The question is, how much money do you have in the asset? What kind of return are you expecting? And are you just do not want to admit that you made a mistake, you know, in the asset, and so you have to reprice some of these assets, I think, and we have to be honest about what the price is here in Rhode Island, and what the price is here in Providence, and what the market will bear, you know. And when it comes to real estate development, you know, you can't subsidize your way, you know, to being like Boston, you know, or New York. You know, it's just not going to happen.
But also
right?
the market dictates. You know, we both live on the east side. We've seen housing prices almost double in the last few, since the Great.
True.
And none of us would have anticipated that. Last 2 years, 40% increases in certain single-family home prices that you would never have imagined. So the market sort of figures it out. It always does.
Yes,
and the first developer may go out of business, just like they did over at Water Place. And those are about as successful project as there is. Let's go to your piece that you wrote this past week. Super interesting.
Thank you.
Let's talk about it a little bit. What was your thought process in putting together that opinion piece?
Well, the piece I wrote was about an initiative that we just launched at BIF with some other collaborators, called Personalized Medicine by Design. I grew up in the healthcare industry. I've watched every aspect of healthcare, medical products, medical devices, healthcare delivery. I've worked in government on the payer side, and we have a healthcare system. It works awfully hard. It's got really great people working in it, but it was a system that was designed, for a different era. It's not capable of using technologies in the way you and I talk about it as a way to change the customer experience. It sees technology through the lens of its own institution. I don't care whether it's a hospital, a doctor's office, an insurance company, or the state itself.
It's absolutely
We need to reimagine this. I've been watching personalized medicine, the new technologies that are evolving, things like the ability to map our own genome. You want to talk about big data, right? And privacy issues. Never mind what you click like on Facebook. Imagine a day when it's free to get your own genome mapped and stored. What's the business model that's going to be wrapped around that? Are we going to sign away permission, for that? Take all of the information in the healthcare system today. It's our information. It's our health and well-being, and yet it's controlled by institutions who claim that they have our best interest. I think it's time to reimagine healthcare for individuals and families. I think it's time to use technologies and tools, to be able to create a model and a system that was designed for us as consumers. So we've launched a project. We're going to start with an exploration around the country to really shift our lens to see the opportunity through the lens of individuals and families, and then we're going to design a new model, and we're going to leverage the BIF methodology. We're going to prototype it in the real world. So we're going to look for partners that want to work with us, and you can tell I'm a little excited about doing this. For me, it's coming back full circle. Let's leverage everything I've learned how to do in the last 14 years at BIF, but let's put it to work directly in a project that could transform healthcare on behalf of families. And so here we go. And just in the week since we've launched it, the interest is amazing. There's I think there's almost 70 people that have signed up to participate participate individuals
Yeah.
from around the country and the world.
So
right?
is it electronic health record times three-dimensional but all-inclusive? So it takes the data that may exist or may not exist in an electronic world, but also then sort of ties in all the apps we know of proper behavior and sort of creates it into, is it to that point of holistic in which I can literally enter into this data sphere about me and my children and my wife and be able to really plan out what we should be doing, what we should be eating, where we should get health care, who the best experts are.
You should be able to manage your own health and well-being future for you and your family. And you should have access to your own information. You should be able to use artificial intelligence and Internet of Things and all these new blockchain to make sure it's secure and that you can trust it. And it should be designed for you and your family. Most of it has been designed for the institutions
100%.
and for the professionals. And not that there's anything wrong with them having access to it, but wait a minute, it's our information.
That's right.
And so I don't think we have to invent anything new to do what I'm talking about. The technology is now at a place where we can use it. I think we just have to reimagine the model and the system, and rather than think about and get into this pointing fingers at what's wrong with the system and trying to worry about how it works nationally for everybody, you know our approach at BIF is start small, right? Take a small number of families, figure out what that model might look like, actually do it, prototype it in the real world, and then when we have it, I'll be back on your air. We'll talk about what we learned, and then we'll be off to the races to say, let's scale this.
And then you'll sell it to the Danish for $510 million.
Maybe, we'll see. I'm purposely going into this saying, you know, maybe there's a company that gets established, but we're going to run the exploration as an open source, have free and transparent information for anybody who wants to see it.
That's right.
And then any of us could start a company, you know, create a platform, create a nonprofit. I don't know what form it's going to take yet, and I'm purposely trying to avoid jumping to the answer. I want to do the exploration first. So that's what we're going to do. Thanks,
I want to thank you and for all the insights. We're going to take a break. Usually we end right now, but we have a special guest into town from Huffington Post who's going to chat about what's going on in D.C., what's going on in politics in town because of Rhode Island College's initiative. We're going to take a break for about 30 seconds, and we'll be right back. Saul, thanks so much.
You bet.
Thank you.